A very important question may appear on the ballot come November 2026. And depending on how the residents of Massachusetts vote on that question, could change the real estate landscape in the state permanently. In this video here, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of rent control and my thoughts on how it could change the real estate landscape forever. Let's get started. Okay, let's first talk about what this bill entails. This bill will affect the 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts. So this is a blanket law that could come into effect if the voters vote for it. This proposal will essentially ban rent increases for just about all rentals to 5% or whatever the inflation is that year, whichever is less. So to give you an example, inflation or the consumer price index was 3% in 2024. So 5%, 3%, it would be 3%. So landlords cannot raise rent more than either 5% or whatever the percentage of inflation was that year. So 2024, it would be 3%. Proponents say this is a way to keep the rising cost of rent at bay and allow people who are struggling to pay rent the ability to stay in their units longer and not have to find a new place to live every year or two when landlords raise rents exponentially. Now, there are some guidelines to this. So any new construction that is less than 10 years old would be exempt from this. But once they hit the 10-year mark, they would then be sort of enveloped into this new proposal. And any owner-occupied buildings of 4 units or less are exempt from this. So whatever you're paying for rent in January of 2026 is the baseline. So if you're paying $3,000 a month and this proposal passes, your landlord will not be able to raise your rent above either 5% of $3,000 or whatever the consumer price index inflation is for that year if it's less than 5%. As it is now, there are several cities and towns throughout the state that do currently have rent control. This was from a ballot question from the 90s that allowed cities and towns to determine themselves whether to do rent control or not. And in Eastern Massachusetts, there's literally like 5 or 6 towns. We have Peabody, we have West Roxbury, Easton, North Reading. I think Rockland also does it. But for the most part, all the other cities and towns that do currently have rent control are all in Western Mass. Now, like I said, this proposal here would not give cities and towns a choice. It would be all 351 cities and towns in the state of Massachusetts will have to implement rent control. Now, let's talk about the pros of this. This, as a tenant, gives some stability. So you know every year that your rent is not going to go up more than 5% at most. So people who are kind of struggling to stay afloat and are worried every year when your lease is up, what your landlord is going to do, you can rest easy that your rent will not go up more than 5% at most. So low income, seniors, other people who are on a fixed income, this is a nice little safety net for you. Proponents also feel that this will slow gentrification of neighborhoods. So you're not going to get people that have lived in neighborhoods for generations getting pushed out for people with higher incomes moving in. Let's talk about the cons now. The cons are landlords will essentially cease upgrading their units. Because if you can't make more than 5% at most, now remember, it's either 5% or whatever inflation is for that year, whichever is less. So it could be as low as 3%. If landlords know that they can't raise the rent more than 5%, they will be less likely to do upgrades, to fix things that are broken because they know they're not going to recoup that money anytime soon. Now, this could become a real issue. We don't want units that are currently maintained to start to go downhill because landlords don't want to maintain them. The other con is that people who are living in units that may not fit their family needs. So maybe they need a 3-bedroom, but they're going to stay in the 2-bedroom, because if they were to leave and find a new apartment, their rent could jump exponentially. So people will stay in place whether it fits their family situation or not. The other con is building multifamily units will begin to slow down. The cost of building materials has risen greatly. The energy costs, it costs an arm and a leg to heat your home and to bring electricity to your home in the state of Massachusetts. So as those numbers rise, in addition to taxes, it will far exceed the 5% that landlords can raise rent every year. So you're going to get people who are just going to say, you know what, I am out of this real estate game. I'm not making any money. If anything, I'm losing money. This is no longer a viable investment. So that we do certainly risk happening. As far as my thoughts, I don't think rent control is a good idea. I think we need to get to the crux of the problem, and that is our energy costs, building costs have skyrocketed in the state of Massachusetts, and our taxes have skyrocketed in the state of Massachusetts. It is simply not cost effective to build and to own rental property if this rent control actually happens. And I understand that landlords sometimes raise rent exorbitantly where tenants feel like they can no longer afford to live in the same rental unit they've had for 10 or 15 years, or they have to completely move out of the neighborhood. But I don't think that freezing rent is the answer. I think that our lawmakers need to get creative. That's what we voted them in for, and find different ways to keep costs at bay so that we don't have to do rent control. We don't have to do those type of extreme measures to control a living situation in real estate. If rent control becomes a thing in 2027, it is not going to be a good thing for landlords and for tenants. And I just hope that residents of Massachusetts, when you go to the polls in November, because I know this is going to end up as a ballot question, you think thoughtfully about the unintended consequences of rent control. Have questions about the real estate market, looking to make a move in 2026? Reach out to me. I'm always available to chat. My contact information will be in the description below. And if you like this video, you got a little bit of value out of it, go ahead and hit that thumbs up and that subscribe button and click that little bell so you get notified whenever a new video drops. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you again soon.